commercial sailing ships were viable well into the 1900s. So these sailing ships needed to be crewed by someone, ideally strong, nimble, and motivated young men, such as aspiring merchant marine officers. A future officer would likely go to sea at a young age, a very young age from our perspective today. Edward J. Smith, future captain of Titanic, went to sea at the age of 17. Arthur Rostron, captain of the ship which rescued Titanic survivors, went to sea at age 16. Charles H. Lightoller, second officer of Titanic, went to sea at age 13. These boys would begin their careers as apprentices. It would be some time before they would even earn the lowly title of sailor. For the time being, their job was to gain enough experience so as to become useful, and they had a lot to learn. One of the first things they would learn is how difficult the next several years of their life would be. As Arthur Rostron put it in his autobiography, quote, "I was to find out that sailing ships meant hard work, sometimes bullying by more or less ignorant officers, great risks, and poor food. Every sort of discomfort that one can conjure to the imagination." The clippers of the late 19th century were demanding in every way imaginable. They were designed to earn profits, and speed was the name of the game for clippers. As such, the hull of a clipper was long and narrow and her masts exceedingly tall to accommodate the tens of thousands of square feet of canvas needed to drive the ship to her maximum. An apprentice could not afford any fear of heights, or he would quickly find his career dead in the water before it even began. The best clippers in the best conditions, or worse conditions depending on how you look at it, achieved speeds of up to 18 knots. For those of you who sail, you know that this is a remarkable speed for a vessel under sail, and that a speed like that would feel much faster for a man on deck than it sounds to a landlubber. And the crew had to work for this type of speed. Clipper captains were notorious for their devotion to speed at all costs. Every stitch of canvas was fully utilized, unless the safety of the ship was at peril, and sometimes even then. It was a dedication inspired by profit, but also by pride, as clipper captains lived and died by their reputations, and the best of them were very nearly of celebrity status. All of this meant that the sailors were laboring hard and risking their lives while on deck or aloft in the rigging, but also that, when allowed to rest below deck, the rest was difficult to acquire. All the sounds and movements of the ship remained, and chances are you would be wet because once you get wet at sea, there's really no drying off, and eventually, even the blankets on your bunk would become damp at best. And despite the conditions, rats and cockroaches somehow survived on the ship to serve as another source of discomfort for her crew. With any luck, you wouldn't go to bunk hungry, but that was anything but a guarantee. It was standard practice for apprentices and sailors alike to sneak food beyond their rations just to get by. Most of the food was about as unappetizing as it came, although in some circumstances, it probably didn't matter much. And it could be days without a single hot meal. A single voyage could last upwards of a year, with the only time on land being when the ship was in port to trade cargo. Chances were that a voyage would take a young apprentice around Cape Horn at least once. It's a waterway infamous for its foul weather and frigid temperatures. It was sometimes said that an apprentice wasn't truly a sailor until he had rounded Cape Horn 3 or 4 times, and contended with those gnarly graybeards, as the rolling, white-capped waves of those waters were called. A young sailor's quality of life while gaining experience at sea depended largely on the crew he was surrounded by, and, most importantly, the abilities and character of the skipper, and they often were characters. There is one infamous clipper captain named Robert H. Waterman, who is publicly known better by the name Bully Waterman. He was a record-setting skipper, having driven his clipper ship Sea Witch from Hong Kong to New York in just over 74 days. But he put the lives of his crew at risk in order to make these remarkable times, and lost many of them in the process, including 9 on a single voyage, 4 of whom fell from the masts and into the sea, and the other 5 succumbing to injuries inflicted either from accidents or abuse. Interestingly, Charles Lightoller writes in his memoirs about a captain he sailed under who went by the similar name Bully Waters. Although he met Bully Waters on a steam packet rather than a clipper, Lightoller notes that the captain had a way of inflicting psychological trauma on his crew by pushing them just to the brink before letting up. No doubt, many sea captains were sadistic for one reason or another, and made the lives of their crew nightmarish. But this was one of the many obstacles for aspiring merchant marine officers. Some young seamen had it a little bit easier by working on a packet ship, for example, rather than a clipper. A packet ship being one which, for economic reasons, carried much less sail and were not driven nearly as hard. The reality is that most trades did not require the hard-earned speed of a clipper ship, and market forces therefore ensured that it was uneconomical for clippers to be used in these trades, primarily the initial building costs and the cost of the huge crew they required. Packet ships operated on a predetermined schedule and carried less urgent cargoes, including passengers. But aside from being driven hard to the maximum speed, the sailors of packets endured all the hardships of their counterparts on the clippers, including often extreme abuse from the captain. While many of these sailors were from respectable backgrounds and were in fact aspiring officers themselves, many of the sailors were plucked up off the streets of port cities and put to work aboard ship. As such, they were, as a group, viewed with disdain by many a packet captain. On packet ships where even the paying passengers were not treated particularly well, the lowly and easily replaceable sailors were treated as practically subhuman. Physical punishment was common, due either to the captain's sadistic tendencies or his belief that such treatment was a necessity when driving a ship at speed with the likes of a crew of degenerates. I should clarify that even though packet ships were not built like clippers and were therefore slower, they were still driven to their own, albeit lower, maximum speed. The toxic shipboard culture was exacerbated greatly by the socio-economic standing of a packet captain. In the days of sailing packets, the captains were among the wealthy elite and earned a percentage of the revenues from a voyage. While the captain earned a different percentage rate from passengers, cargo, and mail, their earnings were extremely high overall. A packet captain could expect to earn something like $20,000 annually, an immense amount of money in those days. For comparison, even the senior captain of a Premier Express liner in the future would never come close to earning this type of money. And in a world more divided by class than today, the captain, a wealthy capitalist with godlike authority over his ship, was unlikely to treat his sailors with much or any respect, especially when those sailors, from his perspective, were serving as obstacles to his payday.